As a marketer, there are times when, you really hit it and you feel great, and there are times when your audience tells you didn't hit it. And I had people Facebook messaging me saying, like, we're making fun of your new product launch. Which wasn't great. Definitely was a hard one to bear.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples. Not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz. Real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
A debranding campaign. Just hearing that word, it hurts me because I can think of all the work that goes into branding, and then you have to debrand. Well, hey, this is what happens when you launch too early. Today, we're also going to talk about building ad campaigns as a solo marketer, being out there adrift on the ocean by yourself. How do you build those good campaigns? Redesigning the website based on a shift in the ideal customer profile, blocking off learning time, sticking up for brand strategy and leadership sessions. Yeah, marketers, that's what we need to be doing in those leadership sessions. And my personal favorite, putting your buyer above what may be best for your bottom line. That's brave, marketers. All right, let's get into it. Let me introduce our guest. Thank you for joining me today, Natalie Marcatulio, the head of growth and operations at Navatic. Thanks for joining us, Natalie.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so briefly, just tell us, what are you doing right now at Navatic? What's going on there?
As you mentioned, currently head of growth and operations, which just essentially means I'm focused a lot on like full funnel marketing. So rather than just like lead gen, demand gen, just how can I make the experience great for our buyers and customers throughout the entire experience?
Great. So that means anyone listening who's anywhere in the marketing funnel can learn from Natalie today. Okay. So let's jump into what we can learn from Natalie. So we as marketers, hey, there's two things we do. We make things and we make them with people. We're going to get to the people Natalie's made it with next. But first, what are some of the things she's made? And this is kind of this first example, like I said, it's kind of something you unmade. So tell us, why did you have to launch a debranding campaign? What was going on there?
Your intro was great because that pain of like building something and then having to take it all away was exactly how it felt. But it was a good learning lesson. We launched a newer version of our product. It was going to have all these new features, be just kind of like a 2.0 version. So we decided originally okay, we're going to call it something new. We're going to give it a whole new name. We're going to do a whole new brand. We're going to do a new website, a whole ad campaign, all of it. And so then we launched it. And as a marketer, there are times when, you really hit it and you feel great. And there are times when your audience tells you didn't hit it. And I had people Facebook messaging me or our account, like the company account, not me personally, saying like, we're making fun of your new product launch, which wasn't great. Definitely was a hard one to bear. But I mean, luckily.
So was it the product itself? Was it the branding campaign? Did you have, Kendall Jenner giving someone a Pepsi during a protest?
Luckily not that bad, but it was more, the product just was a little too early to be launched, honestly. It just we just needed a few more weeks to fix up some bugs, and we got it in a much better spot. And I give full credit, like product engineering turned it around fast and they were able to fix it up. But we had done a lot of hype and promotion for it. So unfortunately, all that hype and promotion then landed in people being more upset when it didn't go well.
So you were pre-selling this, saying like, hey, here's the next great iteration of your product, and then it fell flat. So what was there, just internal pressure to get it to market? Hey, we just got to ship.
Exactly.
We got to be shipping.
We've been kind of waiting for a while. It was taking a little longer than we wanted it to. So there was definitely pressure of like, okay, we just got to get it out and see what happens. Yeah.
So there's that idea. Eric Ries popularized this idea. It's a great idea, the minimum viable product. We actually have done research in Marketing Sherpa. And what we didn't coin this term, someone else did, but what we kind of learned from customers is what you really need is not the minimum viable product, you need the minimum awesome product, because you only get that one chance with a customer sometimes, right? So maybe they see your hype campaign ahead of time, they're like, all right, let me give it a chance, fell flat, I'm done. And so we found out that with customers, when they had a negative experience, they were much less forgiving and much less likely to give another chance to that brand. So walk us through, like, what did the debranding campaign involve? Was there just a big ad that said, oh, never mind? Or how did you do that?
Honestly, we should have done it earlier. And the one thing I regret the most is the fact that we didn't pivot faster. But a few months after, the product was in a much more stable place. And it first started just happening naturally, right? Like once the launch didn't go great, we weren't doing a lot of marketing, promote it with the new language of it. But at some point we had a formal leadership meeting and I think it was actually I had a product that was like, we need to stop using this terminology. Like we need to stop calling it we need to go back to the old terminology and the old brand. As a marketer, I'd never done debranding before. As we talked about, I've only done branding. So from there, it was full website redesign, like scouring every point of the internet of where does this word exist? Like, how can we go back to our old language? And just really trying to convey like, okay, we made a mistake, obviously, with the past branding. How can we go back and bring trust back to our customers?
There's a reason there's a classic Coca-Cola, right? Because one day someone had an idea for new Coke. So we might all have to do a debranding campaign one day. I hope everyone listening doesn't. But as you mentioned, Natalie, it's a great example of having to be agile when things go wrong. And then one last thing I want to bring up. It reminded me of a quote. The founder of MechLabs Institute, which is a parent organization of Marketing Sherpa, wrote a book called The Marketer's Philosopher. There's this great quote in there. He said, "Sometimes we need to slow down to go fast. Action is overrated. Action should be grounded in contemplation." That's by Flint McLaughlin. And that is so true because especially something I've learned, the action being grounded in contemplation. I started my career in the days of print. So I was excited to get a print ad in the Wall Street Journal. And there was a different flow and a different tempo to work back then because it wasn't instant like digital. You couldn't change things instantly. You couldn't communicate instantly. When we wanted to show something to a client, this was even before PDF, we would FedEx and ship. We'd do a comp and FedEx and ship it. And then when we wanted to run ads, there's a deadline. There's a print deadline you had to meet. And I've noticed in my career, the tempo has just increased to this relentless pace. And that, it's a great reminder for all of us, hey, let's slow down to go fast. Let's really think through how we're having customers experience our brand in the world and the actual product. And that actual product,
Yeah,
right?
I love that quote. I think so often in marketing, you can just be so tempted to like, okay, I have to do more. I have to move faster. I have to do exactly what the competition is doing. And sometimes you don't take a step back and just think, why am I doing this? Does our audience even like this? Or do they even read this channel?
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Well, let's go into the next thing you made in your career. So you're talking about building ad campaigns as a solo marketer. And this really ties in as well. Quality over quantity. So what were you trying to do? Keep up with some relentless pace on your own?
Yeah. No, just trying to keep up with competition, experiment with new ads. And this was like, we tried some Facebook ads, we tried LinkedIn ads, Twitter ads, all this. And generally, I've had more success just in my career in SEM than I've ever had in social ads. Some people do it great, but I do think a social ad, especially, like, you need to be so strategic and really have a reason for it. Like, people are on social media, they don't want to look on your ad unless you make it great. So as a solo marketer, I was running probably like a new ad campaign, probably like 2 to 3 a month, which for a solo marketer was a lot because I was also designing these ads. And I would like to think I'm a decent designer. I have an art background. I am not a good designer. My poor old CEO, he was a great designer, constantly had to try to give me nice feedback, being like, this would maybe look better here, or that was a nice idea, but so that also made it more difficult when I was the one designing all the ads, think of all the copy, all this. And I found myself pumping out these ads that just weren't performing well. So we were spending a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources on them. And then eventually just took a step back and said, like, why are we doing this if it's not successful? And how can we be more strategic around our ads and make sure there's a reason in a campaign rather than just putting out ads for putting out ads?
And so you shifted to using more of a marketing calendar approach?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I've learned now around making like ads or campaigns or any of that is I want there to be a reason or a goal behind it. Like, people always ask me as a marketer, how many campaigns do you run? Or when do you know when to do a campaign? And my answer is, when there's a goal, or not even when there's a goal, when there's something that my audience will find that's interesting. So rather than constantly running ads for the sake of it, now I'll schedule out, okay, we're doing this big maybe product update that I know will make users happy or customers happy. That's when I'll run a campaign to them. Or we have this big piece of content coming out that I know our audience will want to engage in. That's when I'm going to run a campaign rather than just like constantly running ads for the sake of running them.
Yeah, I think there's a great analogy in public relations too. I've seen PR pros who are always like looking for reasons to put out press releases. And, sometimes I've been like, yeah, we could put out a press release, right? You could pay amount of money to a press release service and this could be distributed. We could choose to do that. But why would anyone care about this? Why would anyone care? Maybe we'll do less. Let's find stories that people actually care about. Start with the customer and see what they actually care about. So when it comes to also being a solo marketer, how does that feel in the organization, being that only person in there that's focused on this and having no one else to turn to? Because a great analogy, a guy I used to work with, Todd, he always used to bring up, marketing is that kind of one only discipline in the organization where everyone kind of feels like they know it a little. He's like, the CEO never like comes in the morning and talks to the dev team and he's like, hey, have you tried doing like this with code or that with code? But everyone's got an opinion about marketing. Everyone's got an opinion about what will work. You could go to a dinner party and your family will have an opinion about what works. So how does that feel? Like, where do you turn to just kind of get some feedback from others to be around those that like you?
That hits so close to home because I do really appreciate everyone's feedback at my company. And honestly, as a marketer, like, you can't just do it by yourself. But the amount of times that someone said, like, why don't we try TikTok or a podcast? I'm like, well, we don't have the resources, money, and our audience isn't there. So people definitely love to give their opinions, which, again, for the most part, we love. But every now and then you just get those funny suggestions. As far as where I turn to, I think I really use the sales team a lot, honestly, because they're the ones talking to the prospects. So having a close relationship with them, and they will talk to me about good deals, bad deals, good combos, and actually send the recording too. Like, that has been so key as a marketer, that I can watch firsthand how the prospect reacted, what they said. And that's where I can kind of get that like nugget of inspiration and thoughts, because you can't, unless you're doing research, you're not going to do effective marketing. Like, I can't just like come up magically with a campaign that my audience likes if I'm not listening or talking to my audience.
So I love that idea. I think everyone stop and listen to Nugget. I love that idea of putting yourself in the customer's shoes. So you get recordings of sales calls and you listen to them to help understand how the customer's reacting better.
And I put a block on my calendar weekly. And like, maybe I'll go for a walk and do it. Maybe I'll go for a run. And it's also kind of nice just to get off out your desk. But I make sure every week, even a busy week, that I put some time aside to listen to these calls.
I think that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I think that really ties kind of into our third lesson we're talking about here. We talked about redesigning the website based on a shift in the ideal customer profile. So again, a website, when we talk about it, we think it's technology, we think it's numbers, we think it's, all these things going on behind it. But really, it's a conversation between the company and the customer. And the more you can get in that customer's head, the more you can hear their language and the types of specific words they use. I've done that before. Listen to how does a customer talk about things? What specific words do they use? The better you can communicate to them. So tell us about this website redesign. Why did you have to redesign the website?
So this was actually at Nevadic, where I currently work. And I joined in October, and this was the first thing I took on. Which definitely was a lot of whole rebranding and website redesign as your first project as a solo marketer again. And
being new to the company too, to understand the customer.
Luckily I actually was a customer of Nevadic before joining the company, which kind of is a cheat code if you're a marketer and joining a new company. It made onboarding easier. I fully understood the customer's pain points and values, so that definitely helped.
Okay, and so you mentioned that there was a shift in the ideal customer profile. How did you learn about this shift? Why was there this shift?
When I joined, the team was already thinking about this. I wasn't the one who necessarily came in and said, we need to focus on marketers, but the space was becoming more crowded. And when we were looking at who are our most successful customers, who's getting the most value out of our product, we really saw it was marketers. They were the ones who could put it up on their website and instantly see lead flow or just educated prospects. So we decided to shift to really focusing on marketers. And with that, our old website really had more neutral language because it was trying to appeal to a few different use cases. And the whole redesign was, how do we just really speak better to marketers, and specifically like growth marketers, demand marketers?
All right, and when you say putting the prospect experience above all else, so what are some trade-offs you had to make on the website? I mean, it's a common theme in what you've already talked about. And when you're choosing to run ads and all these things you're choosing to do is putting that customer first when you're choosing to release a product. So how did you put the prospect experience above all else on the website?
So one part of this redesign and kind of matching our ICP, like I think marketers really value authenticity. Like we can tell right away kind of what's good and what's a little more fake. And so we were debating whether or not we wanted to put our actual product on our website. So our whole thing is we make product tours so people can experience your product, but we actually didn't have a product tour showing off our own product on our website, which we had an example one, but it was kind of a material app. So sometimes people thought that was our product. It was a little confusing. And so I said, I want to put actually Nevadic on the website. Like I want anyone who goes to the website to be able to see and experience Nevadic. And for the most part, people were on board. I think there's always a little bit of maybe healthy fear of whatever our competitors can see us now. We're showing them everything. And my argument to that is always just, if they want to see your product, they're going to find a way. Like they're going to sign up, they're going to have a friend sign up for a product demo, or they can watch videos, or they can ask customers. So I think customers these day and age, like there's too much information, they'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's the example I like to use. If the U.S. government, the top security agency of the U.S. government couldn't keep things secret, and Edward Snowden was able to release things, how the heck is your company really going to keep things secret? So that's a great example too. Anyone listening, don't try to hide everything and hold things so close to the chest or whatever you want to call it because you're so scared of the competition. Stop focusing on the competition. Think about the customers. So in our last podcast, in podcast episode number 1, we talked to a company, Snap ADU, and what they did is they build these, it's called accessory dwelling units. So it's like another building on your property, like near your house. And they just put everything on their website. They put prices, they put plans, they just put everything out there. And I was asking Whitney Hill, who, about that too, is like, weren't you worried about the competition? And she's like, hey, look, there's enough for everyone. Let's focus on the customer. Let's give them the information they need. It sounds like you took the same approach there, Natalie.
I was just going to say, yeah, I think also this day and age, there's so many companies out there. That's such a good point of like, there's enough for everyone. I think this concept that there's only going to ever be one market leader in SaaS is ridiculous. I don't know any space right now that just has one leader.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's look at the results from this website redesign. You said 40% conversion rates from any lead who fills out a form on the website to booking a meeting with the sales team, and almost a 50% win rate showing the quality of the leads. And do you think that's because of that transparency you had on the website?
I think it kind of talks about the value of the product itself, by prospects being able to see our product up front and understanding it. Now when they go to sales calls, they don't have to spend, 50 minutes trying to understand what is the product. Like they know generally what they're signing up for. Most of the times they're just kind of like, I just need to see how it works. But like, yes, I understand the value, which as a marketer is music to your ears. You want everyone your sales team to talk to understand the value. Obviously not everyone's going to be a perfect fit, but at the minimum, they should understand why they're at this sales demo. And I've definitely been on demos where I'm like, I don't really understand what your product does. I don't really understand its value. I just need someone to explain this to me because your website doesn't tell me anything.
And then the website's not working, right? Yeah. So we've seen that with companies before. The more transparency you put on the front end, the more the customer understands the product, the higher the win rate. So great example, River Pools and Spas. We've talked about this before. Marcus Sheridan, who now goes by the sales line. He did so well in the pool business. He's now consulting about sales and marketing. And they put up just all this content about pools. They put up prices. Again, they put up all that. His theory was there's no secret sauce. There's no secret sauce. And so before they had a win rate of like 30% because people, when they would call someone out for a pool, they probably call 3 pool companies and okay, they'd randomly pick one. But after, when they had people exposed to all this content, they understood everything at that point. Really, the sales rep is just coming out to take a few measurements and give you an official quote. So definitely. So, all right, let's now talk about people you collaborated with. So as you said, there's really 2 main things in marketing. We talked about some of the things Natalie has made. That is such an exciting and fun thing about marketing, unlike so many other industries today where you're just pushing paper around or managing pensions, or I don't know what other people do, but we actually make things. We make things that we can show. That website that Natalie made, she can show the world that website. The debranding campaign, guess you can't really show because you took everything down. But other than the things that we have made in our career, they're the people that we collaborated with, that we really learned from. And the first person you wanted to talk about, Natalie, was Matthew Sniff, the Chief Product Officer of Map My Customers. How did he teach you about blocking off learning time? What happened there?
So as I mentioned, I've basically always been a solo marketer throughout my career. And there's definitely a time when I was just similar to like the ads, just executing. My whole calendar, like I self-block my calendar, so my whole calendar is blocked off. And I definitely found myself like being in a rut. I was, works hard. No one, like generally not many people absolutely adore every second of their job, but I found myself definitely struggling more than I normally was. And I brought it up to him and he made the great point of like, you're kind of just running in circles. By executing and just executing, you're not actually having any time to think strategically. You're not taking time back. And you might actually be producing worse work because you're not thinking strategically. And I like, it was such an obvious thought, but it wasn't until he like sat down and said it to me that I was like, you're right. I'm not giving myself any of this. And what I do now is I make sure almost every day that I just have learning time. So whether that's, scrolling through LinkedIn, honestly, you learn a lot from the content there. And again, I'm selling to marketers, so I'm learning what they're saying. Or maybe it's going to a webinar or attending something. I just don't think the human mind is meant to be productive for 8 to, however many hours a day. So giving yourself that off time and learning time, 1, just makes it so when you are working, you're going to be more productive. But then 2, also gives you those valuable insights and strategies you need to do your job.
Yeah, I found that too, that, there's got to be this balance between input and output. It's like, a bank account. You put in, you take out. And so sometimes when I've just been so grinding in my career, I'm drained and the good ideas just aren't coming. And let's face it, folks, marketing is an idea industry. Right? Marketing is an idea industry. We're not like, I don't know what it's like to be a mechanic, but imagine you go and you fix the car, you look at the book, you fix the car. We need to come up with ideas. And if we're not putting anything in, nothing is coming out. So for me, even stuff like I love stand-up comedy. I love stand-up comedy podcasts and hearing about the craft of that. And what can I learn from that for my craft? Or going to an art museum or going out in nature, or reading just about something totally unrelated to marketing and making the connection. I think it's so helpful. And of course, I would be remiss at this point not to mention, if you are looking to block off some learning time, just even listening to this podcast, you're doing that. Going to Marketing Sherpa or reading our case studies, you're doing that. We have through MECLab's Institute, a free digital marketing course called Become a Marketer Philosopher. That is another way to do that. But again, it's either learning in the marketing industry, like the stuff we produce, or just going out and finding some passion, learn about anything interesting and unique. Learn about how a stand-up comedian did their craft, an artist did their thing. Learn about how, Elon Musk is putting cars together, and that will spark new ideas in you. What's your favorite thing to learn about, Natalie, outside of marketing? Like what is really kind of just, you live in New York City, there's got to be just some great museums, great, all sorts of things to learn from. Yeah, I think
art has to be it. I wish, honestly, it's something I wish I did more than I do, but I was an art minor in college. When I was between jobs, I spent a day, which is embarrassing because I should just more like sketching along the New York, which was very funny because it made me feel as if I was in like a movie or something, or this whole change in my life. But it's like, no, I've done this once. People came up to me like, oh, are you an artist? I'm like, no, I'm just trying to get back into it. But that's definitely the type of thing I'm trying to learn about outside of work.
Sometimes it's fun to put that other hat on and see what it's like, right? What being an artist is like for a day. All right, so thanks to Matthew for that lesson. Next up, Andrea Kayal, CMO at Electric. You learned sticking up for brand strategy in leadership session. So take us to that session. What was going on that you had to stick up for the brand strategy?
Yeah, and I can go kind of into her lesson first. She was my advisor at the time, and I remember speaking to her and just being very frustrated and just saying, like, I feel like, I keep getting things assigned to me, but I'm not necessarily I'm not having as much say. Like, I feel like as marketers, as you said, everyone likes to put their input, but when it comes down to the big leadership decisions, it's what does sales think? What does engineering think? And sometimes it's not always, how does this affecting our brand or, is the decision we're making? So there are definitely, some meetings where we would be making a decision about like pricing for, I think this one specifically maybe was related to pricing and how we're pricing. And, you're thinking about what's best for operations or our bottom line, all that, and I have an operations background too, so I get it. But at some point we have to think like, is this the authentic thing to do? Does this match our brand value? Does this match what our customers want? Because at the end of the day, it sounds silly, but if it doesn't match what our customers want or expect out of our brand and it feels inauthentic, they're not going to go for you. So I just remember in this meeting specifically being pretty vocal about, yes, this pricing strategy might be better, but it doesn't seem aligned with what we're doing or how our customers want to buy or what they need. I actually can't remember the exact outcome, what we ended up going with, but I think as marketers, it's just a lesson, your opinion is just as important as everyone else's. Obviously, you're not the one bringing in the money, but you're the one who is controlling the whole narrative around the brand and also bringing in the leads that sales sells to. Like, I think it's funny how sales always gets a lot of credit, and they should, but it's never thought about like, where did those leads come from? Yeah,
well, as a marketer, you're owning the company's face to the world. You're making a promise to customers. So you have to always be the advocate for the customer in that company. And I wouldn't devalue marketing company. Yes, of course, sales is bringing in the dough at the end of the day. But really, everyone in that company, every organization has a job because of the marketer, because what they're putting out into the world to, we kind of say crassly, generate demand generation. What does that really mean? It means a reason for the company to exist, bringing in customers. So yes, good for you for fighting that good fight. Well, I don't know how it turned out either. We'll rewrite history on the podcast right now and say you won that conversation and it was the right thing for the customer. So good for you. And actually, lastly, I want to mention too, Marketing Sherpa, we've done research on, this is what we call it. We call it customer first marketing. And we have found that when customers get this sense, they get this feel that like, oh, the company is acting in my best interest, are more forgiving of the company if they make a mistake. And it makes sense because we have human relationships like that, right? Like when you have a good relationship with, like, let's say your spouse, when they do something like they don't take out the garbage, they do whatever, you're forgiving, like, oh, that's fine, they're a good person. But when things aren't going well and you don't think they are putting your best interest first and they do the same thing, same action, but different intention, then you start to question what's going on here. And customers are the same with us. So let's not think. I've been in so many of those meetings too, Natalie, where like they're talking internally and, I was like, yeah, we can say whatever we want in the ad because we're buying the ad, right? But who's going to believe it, right? And if they don't, we're wasting money.
Exactly. Yeah. I think so often it's so tempting just to think about how is this best for my business, which, I mean, at some point you obviously have to think about your business. And as I mentioned, like I also have an operations side. So there's also definitely part of me that thinks like, how is this best for our processes to make everything more efficient? But at the end of the day, I have to remind myself, it's ultimately all about the customer and their experience.
And that's the whole reason the business exists. If it wasn't for the customer, we wouldn't be here. So lastly, lesson from Chris Walker, the CEO of Refine Labs, this is a really common theme in what we've been talking about today, Natalie, about putting your buyer above what may be best for your bottom line. So how did you learn this from Chris?
So I actually just did an interview, like I was interviewing him for a series that we were doing kind of like this. And he puts out a lot of great content. If you don't follow him, highly recommend, like super great content around basically this whole idea is like, how can you create the best experience for your buyer? And when we were doing this interview, I think he was talking about, like lead gen, the idea of lead gen, how so many marketers are really just trying to get leads, get emails, and not actually creating a community or an experience, like not thinking what do these people want, just trying to make it best for their bottom line. And that really got me thinking about our whole life cycle, how are we at every single stage actually making the experience as good as possible for the customer? So after that meeting, like it was really like sticking in my mind, kind of illuminating is the right word, kind of just ruminating around there. There we go. And I ended up meeting with our head of CS and I was like, I want to map out the entire customer journey as it is today. Like, let's sit down, and we're still doing this. It's been a multi-session event. Like, it's not something that you're just going to crank out in an hour. But we've been mapping out every single point, where are there friction points? Where could it be better? And then once that's all over, we're going to go in and really analyze those big points, analyze those friction points and say, how can we improve this? What are things we can do from marketing, from sales, from product, the whole organization? Like, how can we help out in this? So that's been a really, honestly, fun exercise. And I think something that we don't do enough is to take a kind of zoom out to say, like, okay, what is the experience like from the very first time they hear about us to the very end when they renew?
Yeah, mapping out that customer journey. And meeting with your head of customer service, too, is a great example of marketing not just sitting in their silo and doing their own thing and saying, oh, well, I only own the ads or I only own the lead generation. Every experience, every touch point you have with the customer affects the brand. So one example in my own life I just had personally, which kind of drove me nuts, was more of an operational thing, but I bought I think it was a washing machine from Home Depot. And so this was before COVID. So I was working from home just to get this washing machine. I'm sitting and I live on a cul-de-sac, this just pickup truck with a trailer swing around with a bunch of washing machines on it. And I'm like, well, that can't be, I bought it from Home Depot. That can't be mine. And sure enough, it swings back around and it was like two guys in a pickup truck and they dropped off the washing machine. And I thought, what a bad brand experience. Like, what an opportunity for Home Depot to have a positive brand experience with a customer with the Home Depot truck and, crisp Home Depot uniforms and dropping it off and installing it, when it probably came down, like you were talking about before, Natalie, probably came down to an operations meeting. And it's like, we can save, $3 per fulfillment if we outsource to local contractors, versus the marketer stepping up and saying, wait a minute, there is a whole customer experience that customers have with us from the very first time they learn about Home Depot till they receive their product. We're going to make sure every one of those is a really high quality touch point so people buy from us again. So look at your sit down with your head of customer service, operations, whoever it is, look at that whole customer journey, see how you can improve it. But the other thing you said, Natalie, which I love, is you got inspired by a conversation like we talked about earlier, like make sure you fill your head with really exciting, inspiring things. Hopefully we've done that for you today in the podcast. Hopefully you hear something, you go back to your company, you make an improvement. If so, tell us about it. And lastly, what do you want to leave people with, Natalie? What's that one last piece of inspiration, insight you'd like to kind of marching orders to inspire people to go?
I think the biggest thing is just think about your customer journey and your experience. Like, anything you put out there, just think about for yourself, would I enjoy this? Even if you're not the audience, just generally, if you put out a blog post, right? It's so easy just to put out a blog post that regurgitates 5 other blog posts. Think, would I actually read this? And if the answer is no, then it might be time to reevaluate some things.
That's perfect. When we were talking about this podcast, right before I started interviewing Natalie, I said that's exactly what we did with the podcast. Why does there need to be another podcast in the world? And we really had to think that through. And hopefully you see there's a need for this. These kind of conversations, this back and forth, this real life, this seeing what it's really like to be a marketer and how different marketers made it in their marketing career. Well, thank you for joining us and listening. And thank you for joining us, Natalie, and sharing what you've learned in your career.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketing, SHERPA.com.